Before we get started today, I want to begin with a little verse that was brought to my attention recently. And in the past, we've looked at how when Jesus says, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear," something would have to literally be heard in the original language the way Jesus spoke it. This is an example of one of those verses or one of those passages. This is Matthew chapter 13, verses 27 through 28. This is the parable about the tares. And it says, So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, did not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? And here it is in the Greek, just so you can see it. And there's got some words there that are highlighted. You can see the different colors that match the Greek to the English there. Well, the blue is Effie, and this is literally he said. This is simply affirming or denying something. In other words, they said, Did you not sow tares? And he replied to that. And this is autos, is to them. He replied to them. When you put these words together, it creates a different word. It sounds very the same, Ephiautos and Ephialtos. Ephialtos means nightmare. In the Greek. Now, this ancient word for nightmare is not used in the Greek New Testament or in the Septuagint, but it relates to a throttling demon. Now, do you remember when we looked in the past at how terror in the night in Psalm 91:5 is not just a fear of the dark, but is actually a name for a specific demon? Well, this throttling demon refers to a Mesopotamian god named Pazuzu. He was considered evil, but was often invoked for protection against other gods and goddesses. For reasons we don't need to go into, I'm only going to show him from the waist up here. Now, there is a toy called the Labubu doll. I'm not sure that's how you pronounce it. That's the way it's spelled. It came from a Chinese company. But this toy has gone viral, and it's based upon this demon. This demon is called the Nightmare. This toy went viral. It's aimed at kids. Your kids may have one of them, and millions of people have this demon. They're playing with it. It's worth a lot of money the last I looked. But just think about this. Your kids may be playing with this demon that is called a demon and is marketed towards kids. But Pazuzu was the god of the winds. When we have ears to hear, we should have an idea of a nightmare in general whenever these words are said, Ephialtes, or more specifically, a throttling demon, for the imagery that's being presented here. And this word that's translated as gender, or as gather, not gender, this word that's translated as gather is sulexomen, and it means to gather or to collect together, but it is never used in a positive sense for those who are involved by Jesus. So when he says, I'm going to gather them up, this is being used in a negative sense by Jesus on this. This is just a little interesting tidbit that I wanted to pass along on this. Now, we're going to be starting a short series tonight. It's a very taboo subject. I couldn't even find a good background picture for the PowerPoint today. And I'll tell you right now, if politics offends you, you may as well leave now before you get offended. I started working on this short series of lessons on politics in the Bible, probably 2 or 3 studies overall. Started working on it a few weeks back, but after the events of this past week, when someone was assassinated by a transgender terrorist simply for speaking words that this person didn't like, I had planned on putting off talking about politics. However, I was out walking my dog, and God impressed upon me that it is perhaps more important now than it's ever been to talk about this. We're approaching a time that this is going to become very important. So here we go. You've probably heard that you should avoid politics in church and at the dinner table. That's common knowledge, but is it actually wise knowledge? When somebody tells me that I should avoid politics in church and at the dinner table, I say, why? Because you see, Jesus did not avoid politics. And nowhere are we told to avoid politics except by those who are opposed to our politics. The only people that don't want us to talk about it are the people who don't like what we have to say. And in fact, as we've seen, Ephesians 6:12 very clearly warns us that politicians are quite often the enemy. This is out of the Geneva Bible. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against the worldly governors, the princes of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness which are in high places. Now, in the United States, there are two major political parties. In a plurality vote, you can theoretically have an unlimited number of parties, but there is in reality a limit of two parties, no matter how many parties they claim there are. This is a mathematical propensity that's explained by Duverger's law, which I have a link to it below. No matter how many parties, it's going to boil down to two sides. Now, there are two sides of the political spectrum. You have the left and you have the right. Now, some people may be in the middle, just a little bit to the right or to the left or on extreme ends or whatever, but there are two basic paradigms. So, what do those two paradigms represent? What is their belief system? Well, the left believes that humans are perfectible, that good people in power can save the world, the future is all progress, the only real things are material things. They teach materialism. They teach that inequality comes from oppression. Everybody's a blank slate. Cultural differences are arbitrary and can easily be transformed. Tradition holds us back, and that it's wrong to judge someone by the results, and you have to be loyal to all of humanity. Now, this is just 10 points. There's more, obviously, but these are the 10 basic tenets they have, and not everybody on the left agrees with all of them. Many do, but this is the way that it leans. Now, the right generally believes that humans are inherently flawed. They believe that power corrupts, that it's possible to descend back into barbarism, that they believe there is a God, that inequality is a state of nature, races, classes, and sexes are genetically different, cultural differences are important, tradition is valuable, even if we don't know why, that you can assess things by competency. We call this a meritocracy, and you have loyalty to your group over others. Now, the terms left and right in terms of politics goes back to 1789. The French Revolution was in full force, and the National Assembly acted as the revolution's government. The delegates were divided over how much authority the king should have, and the two main groups segregated themselves into different areas of the assembly hall. Those who were anti-royalists against the kings, the revolutionaries, they seated themselves to the left of the presiding officer, and the more conservative supporters of the monarchy sat to the right. In other words, they were literally left or right of where he was sitting, and this is based upon their viewpoint. Now, due to Duverger's law, any other viewpoint was swallowed up into one of these two camps, left or right. Now, at the time, the right wing was conservative, meaning they wanted to keep things the way they were, and the left wanted to change things. Now, change is neither good nor evil in and of itself. Depends on what you want to change and how you want to change it. For example, in the United States, when the change was made, this is what would be classic liberalism, what we would call libertarianism today. It was good. When we seceded from England and the United States Constitution was written, it was based upon Christian principles. It threw off oppression. In the French Revolution, it was anti-God and it was a failure. Change is neither good nor bad in and of itself, but the important thing is that the terms evolve over time, and the basic tenets listed above are in the modern Western world. The modern right, the modern conservatism, tends to want to preserve the United States Constitution as ratified. They want to preserve positive morality. They want to preserve the Christian principles that the society is built upon instead of tearing them down. In other words, in the United States, conservatives believe in the United States Constitution and the principles behind it, whereas the left wants to destroy it all and rebuild it in their own materialistic, humanistic image. And make no mistake about it, they'll say there's no such thing as objective morality. There is objective morality. There is right and wrong. There is good and evil. It's not all just one big gray area. Now, this is a brief overview of the terms. A full history of the usage and the ways that they've been used historically in places such as Bolshevik Russia are interesting, but not pertinent to our current discussion. You can read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy to get a good view of what was going on there. Now, to take a look at the extreme far left and why they want to destroy morality and the nuclear family, we can look at their own words. We don't have to put words in their mouths. I'm going to cite some statements from the Firebrand Collective. I'm not going to post a link to their website because their website is not secure. I don't want anybody to get hacked or uh, get their files corrupted or anything like that. So I'm not going to post a link to it. But the Firebrand Collective is a group of radical leftists who are growing a network of Marxists in order to radically alter the Western world. The Firebrand Collective itself talks its way around what it truly is. In other words, they don't tell people straight up what they're doing. They kind of talk around it a little bit. But their associate members, they're loud and proud to be communists after the order of Marx, Lenin, and so on. Now remember, Karl Marx was a Satanist, and these groups want to emulate him. And Ephesians 6:12 tells us that the demonic world operates in the political world. Now, their site says that social reproduction, this is a quote, social reproduction is the labor of replenishing and recreating the working class justified by oppressive gender ideology and family values. The work is essential to the maintenance of capitalism. So, this is their social reproduction theory, and we need to understand this. I do have a link below to a video on this subject by the Denver communists who are part of the Firebrand Collective. And to me, it's appalling that so many people fall for this and embrace it wholeheartedly. There is a link to the video, not a link to the Firebrand Collective website. But this is what they believe about the nuclear family, that that's all it's for is to produce more workers. The video states all our social problems share a common root in the mode of production, capitalism. In other words, the left's goal is to completely abolish capitalism. Now, capitalism is a model that's set forth in the Bible as a positive example. I'm going to read quite a few verses here. This is the parable of the talents. This is Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 28. For it is as a man traveling into a far country who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the five talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1, digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants comes and reckons with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought forth other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou delivered unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And he also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou delivered unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strewn. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there that thou hast is thine. And the Lord answered unto him and said, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knew that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strewn. Thou ought therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury, or with interest. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. Now I know that this is a talent, and this is not about literal money. However, the example that Jesus uses as something positive is monetary gain. In other words, is capitalism. And it would be preserved and irrational for Jesus to say, Now I know that capitalism is really bad, but we're going to pretend that it's good so that we can use it as a basis for this parable for something good. That's stupid. This is something that's positive. But as with anything positive, it can be misused by people. Now, I don't want us to get bogged down in a discussion on basic economics at the moment, but basically, capitalism is positive. John Calvin saw this, convinced the king to give capitalism a try. It worked stunningly. Then they had a war, and the necessities of war reverted them back to a form of mercantilism, and the experiment fell by the wayside. It did work, but they had to abandon it. Later, Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, and the left has hated success based on merit ever since then. Frederick Bastiat is another Christian who wrote about the morality of capitalism and is considered the most brilliant economic journalist who ever lived. I do have a link to the Bastiat collection below, it's free. But capitalism is a moral economic system. The left believes, with some justification, that capitalism is both an economic model and a social and cultural model. The communist model is not just about going to the store and buying groceries, it's about seizing the means of production. They want to seize private ownership of businesses. They want to take from the producers to give to the non producers. Thou shalt not steal. That should sound familiar to you. But to them, that's an abomination because they feel that they have the right to steal and give to whom they feel like. It's materialism. They feel that they have the right to steal from the producers to give to the non producers. Since most things are not produced in factories anymore, it's more about stealing all the cultural and societal norms that uphold capitalism, such as gender roles, merit, and more importantly, the nuclear family. In other words, they have to seize the entire economic model. Titus chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. But speak thou the things which become sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, in charity, and patience. The aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becomes holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Young men likewise exhort to be sober minded, in all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say about you. In other words, live the way you're supposed to live. You know, the Bible is not just God saying, here's a bunch of rules just to see if you can follow them, and if you do, I'll give you good stuff. It's a sort of an owner's manual for how to have a moral and safe society. Now, it's important that we not only read our Bibles, but we have to know them. And to do that, we have to study them. The left hates God. The left hates morality. The left wants to destroy everything that's good. Our world has devolved into a world of wokeness, political correctness, mob mentality, social justice religion. It's neither social nor justice, but it's a religion. The cult of the climate. And make sure that no one is ever offended except for those who are moral and ethical. It's okay to offend them, but don't you dare offend somebody else. The left claims to be about tolerance and love, yet they're full of hate and they're intolerant of anything or anyone who points out truth and sin. Truth must be destroyed at all costs. Why? And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, the word evil is not some red guy with horns and a pitchfork. Evil is oppression. The dark forces that control the left, they don't want you to be free. They want you to be slaves and they want you to serve them. And you will be a slave unless you speak truth. And if you don't know truth, you can't speak truth. And if you know and speak truth, the world is going to hate you. Now, if you support any organization, if you give money to any charity or anything like that, look at their mission statement. And if their statement does not support or promote the nuclear family, they're evil. Most of these so-called justice warriors want to break down the family. The Bible teaches that the nuclear family is necessary to liberty, therefore, in their eyes, it must be destroyed. Now, does this mean that every nuclear family is healthy? Of course not. We all know the ones that are completely dysfunctional. But the nuclear family must be the framework in order for there to be a healthy society. And the passage we just read tells us how the church should function. Doctrine begins with the leadership of the church, the elders, and then the younger members. The single pastor model of a church is unbiblical. Pastor is a gift, not an office. There may be one preacher, but there should be multiple pastors who guide the church family, the flock. There may not be more than one available, but ideally, there would be more than one leader, but even if there is just one preacher. And this passage tells us how to do it with every member participating. In Hebrew, there's no word for retire. And in this passage, Paul warns against the elders falling into bitterness and laziness. They're to remain sound in the faith and to remain steadfast. They have a purpose in teaching and discipling the younger members. They are to teach each other how to be better husbands and wives, better parents and children. They're to teach each other how to be the nuclear family. It's a nuclear family that's not healthy can be made healthy through this discipling. They can promote the faith and thereby create better families that are more godly. It's all from the top down. The family is a physical expression of God's love. Godly parents will usually produce a house that's in order with children who love God. There'll be exceptions. Godly children will grow up to be godly adults who will go on to build more stable families. A successful family gives God glory because that's the way things are supposed to be. God is our Heavenly Father who's over His children, believers, in a loving and healthy way. And while single parent families will always be present, orphans will always be present, broken families will always be present, we have to do what we can in faith to make the situation as healthy as possible. Sadly, single mothers are not usually single in the United States. They have a husband. It's the government. But a family is intended to be one mother, one father, and the children they create or the children they choose to bring into their family. And the parent's responsibility is to raise those children to know and fear the Lord. Now, our society is not atheistic. It's controlled by a very real spiritual world that knows there's a God, and they hate it. Marx was not an atheist. He fully believed that there's a God, and he hated him. And this society will undermine the will of God. This society will stop the celebrating a family as God designed it, and it will denigrate it and try to destroy it. Destroy the patriarchy. We've got to get rid of fathers. Both mother and father play a role, but they're different roles. And if you know the Bible, you know how things are supposed to be. You'll be able to discern things that are unbiblical or things that are anti-biblical and the things that are going to harm the ways of godly people. Rarely does Satan say, here, do this and I'll draw you away from God. Although our public education institutions do this far too often. But Satan is subtle. He will present things that look good, and those who are not discerning will fall for them. The demonic world will not lie when the truth will work. Yea, hath God said. They'll tell the truth and then they'll twist it just a little bit to deceive people. As believers, we need to be able to discern the whole truth and not just part of it. When we want to love our neighbor as ourselves, we need to make sure we know what that means and not do something that sounds good but is actually quite harmful. If we read something in the Bible that makes us uncomfortable, we need to ask ourselves, why does that make me uncomfortable? Is it something that we need to fix in ourselves? Usually. We need to pass sound doctrine along when we can, but we must first know what sound doctrine is ourselves in order to be able to discern between right and wrong. And that begins in the family, father, mother, children. The nuclear family is a very specific problem for the left. If labor power produces value, how is labor power itself produced? In other words, how do we produce workers? Well, the left believes that the system of capitalism is quite literally reproduced through the nuclear family because the nuclear family is where godly children are made. They speak of reproductive labor and unpaid activities of raising the next commodity of labor power when what they mean is children, and raising children. They believe that this is an unpaid labor that families perform in order to feed new workers into the capitalist system. And in this twisted way of thinking, capitalism relies on both labor used to produce things and labor used to produce people. Because of this, they believe that the nuclear family is oppressive to women because women are the primary caretakers of the family in a nuclear family. Did you ever wonder why it's almost impossible to afford to raise a family on one income in the United States anymore unless you want to buy a cheap home in a crime-infested area? And sure, it's because taxes have reached confiscatory rates and government demands have increased the cost of everything. But think about who's in control of the government. It's not an accident that things have arranged themselves that it necessitates the mother and father both being out of the house. And because the nuclear family is supposedly oppressive to women, they want to destroy gender roles at birth. There was a scene in a Monty Python movie in which a woman gave birth and asked, "Is it a boy or a girl?" And the doctor responded, "Don't you think it's a bit early to start imposing roles in it?" Back then, that was funny because it poked fun at the fringe. I mean, nobody in their right mind thinks that that's imposing a role on it. It was funny. Today, it's not funny. It's reality and it's scary. If someone denies basic realities, such as there being only two genders, there can be no rational discussion or debate, and without rational discussion or debate, only brute force and violence is left. But this is the new reality. It's an evil reality. It's what they want. To their twisted way of thinking, capitalism's power comes from the nuclear family, and the power of the family comes from the woman being forced to do the unpaid labor in order to reproduce it. This is also why the left is so dominated by those who want to kill unborn babies through abortion. That frees a woman from doing unpaid labor and having to raise the next generation of the proletarians. And this is not me speaking. This is using their own words. This is what they say. They explicitly state that the function of the working class family is to provide the system with workers. Therefore, the nuclear family is literally the means of reproduction of labor, and they want to destroy it. And they state, this is following the lead of Marx, that they want to seize the means of production. In other words, they want the factories to be in the hands of the people. First of all, factories already are in the hands of the people through the stock market. Second of all, factories are not where most business is taking place. They say they want to seize the means of production, but what they mean is they want to seize the means of reproduction. And as long as people are getting married in monogamous relationships, having children, then passing down their wealth to their children, the left cannot overthrow the system. And that's their goal, is to overthrow the system. Ironically, the left is also opposed to homosexual marriage as well for the same reason. That's another discussion for another time. They like everything bizarre in the world, but they don't like homosexual marriage because it creates stability. They want instability. They want to destroy the nuclear family in order to overthrow the system that is based upon biblical principles. They're demonic and they hate God. And as a side note on this, I don't want us to get distracted by this right now. I'll do a short video on this later. Our world is terribly overpopulated and the population is still growing right now. However, we're headed towards a population collapse in the near future that is caused by infertility, and that is caused in large part by production, byproduct of phthalates and BPAs that are used in almost everything that is manufactured today. It is literally everywhere, and you can only get away from it in isolation chambers. And the problems that they cause are then encoded onto your genes, and you pass that down, and they become a permanent problem for your descendants, and there's going to be a population collapse because of it. You know, I said at the beginning that the verse about the throttling demons was a little side note, not relevant. I think maybe it is more relevant to what we're talking about here than I had originally thought. But I want us to spend a few minutes here comparing and contrasting the right and the left on the political spectrum as it is today and look at it from a biblical perspective. The first one is that the left believes that humans are perfectible. The right generally believes that humans are inherently flawed. Romans 3:23 just says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." Then 1 John 1:8 says, "If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us." The left believes that good people in power can save the world. The right believes that power corrupts. Isaiah 14, verses 12 through 15. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. This is possibly the most powerful being ever created by God, and he became the most corrupt being ever. Power corrupts. The left believes that the future is all progress. The right understands that it's possible to descend back into barbarism. And Christians know that civilization will collapse and descend back into barbarism before the Lord steps in to intervene. At least we know that if we've read the book. Far too many people have not read the book, at least they've not studied the book, and they're being deceived by so-called Christian leaders every day. Some Christian leaders say, it's all good, just come here and sing and dance your hands and you're all good. Other leaders, cult leaders, most cults are actually Christian-based. They have leaders who deceive many by using the book of Daniel or the book of Revelation out of context to get people to follow them. And too many believers are deceived because they have no discernment. We'd have to discern. Judges 21:25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Do you know what it means to do what's right in your own eyes? The Bible calls that lawlessness. Is there lawlessness in the world today if you look around? Hannah Arendt said the death of human compassion is one of the earliest and most telling signs of a culture about to fall into barbarism. I see that around us every day. Matthew 10, verses 14 through 15. And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear your words when you depart out of that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. You know, most people think that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because of their homosexuality. And that was a problem, but that's not why they were destroyed. Ezekiel 16:49. Behold, this was the iniquity. The Septuagint uses the word for lawlessness here. This was the lawlessness of thy sister Sodom. Pride. We have set aside a month for pride every year, and it's a pride and an abomination. A fullness of bread, plenty of food that you don't even have to work for. An abundance of idleness. Got too much time on your hands. These things were in her and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. Nothing in here about homosexuality. And this strengthening the hand of the poor and needy is not about giving them stuff necessarily, but it's about not oppressing them and keeping them where they are. Give them a hand up. Sometimes you have to give somebody something to give them the hand up, but you're supposed to strengthen their hand. You're supposed to help the poor, not keep them poor. We see all of these things in the world today. Next on our list, the left believes the only real things are material things. They believe in materialism. The right believes there is a God. 1 John 2:16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. This is the cosmos. This is the world system. Who is the God of this world? These things are not of the Father. These are the things of Satan. Matthew 6:19 through 21. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth. This is not cosmos. This is a different word. But lay not up for yourself treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And if you live in the United States, this should be something that you're familiar with, that should show you how far we've fallen. This is the preamble and the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. It's based on God. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is not an atheist nation. This is not a materialist nation. But it is now. It was not. That's not the way it was founded. Our nation was founded upon Christian principles. We were supposed to be a beacon to the world. But today there is a myth that they must be completely separated. And it is demonic forces that try to destroy faith. Now, the left believes that inequality comes from oppression. The right believes that inequality is a state of nature. Oppression comes from oppression. Inequality is natural. Not everybody has the capability of being an NBA superstar. Some people are smarter, healthier, funnier, better looking, stronger, faster. The list goes on and on. But we're expected to use our strengths to further teaching the Word of God and the words of God. We're all equal in the eyes of God, and supposedly we're equal in the eyes of the law, but we don't all have equal abilities. The body of Christ is made of many members, but we're not all arms and legs. Somebody has to be the big toe. Acts chapter 10, verses 34 through 35. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. From the ESV, James chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears a fine clothing and says, You sit here in a good place, while you say to the poor man, You stand over there or sit down at my feet, have you not then made distinction among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts, with oppressive thoughts? See, that's the key. We are to treat the janitor with equal dignity as the airline pilot, assuming that they both work to the best of their ability. But to make the janitor equal to the pilot and give him the key to the plane would be insanity. Yet that is what the left does in order to achieve what they call equality. They expect equal outcome out of unequal people. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said human beings are born with different capacities. If they're free, they're not equal, and if they're equal, they're not free. Now, the left also believes that everybody's a blank slate, but the right understands that different races, classes, and sexes are genetically different. In India, in the name of equality, they sent untouchables to medical school and they failed miserably. Why? Because people are different. They have generations of IQ differences, generations of cultural differences, generations of differences in abilities. Equal in our eyes if they are brethren, but not equal in outcome. 1 Corinthians 12:12. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. Like I said, somebody has to be the big toe. If you're a toe, you don't have the ability to be a tooth. Although there is actually a very interesting surgery for blind people now when they go blind from certain circumstances. It's very rare that they can do this, but in this few circumstances, this has been fewer than 200 times ever in the world, they can actually take a tooth and modify it heavily and insert it into the eye, and then the patient can once again see. It's not normal and it's not equal. It's an exception, but if you're a hand, you're a hand. If you're an arm, you're an arm. And if you're a big toe, you're a big toe. There is a link below to the story about that tooth that you can see through, by the way. Now, the left believes that cultural differences are arbitrary and can be easily changed, but the right understands that cultural differences are important. Without those differences, life would be boring. But sometimes cultural differences do need to be changed, and it's not easy. They're not arbitrary. They are inherited from your parents. You pick them up in your home, and you pick them up from the culture in which you're raised. If your culture calls for cheating and stealing, that obviously is a culture that needs to be changed. That's why we preach on sin. But if your culture has a different diet than mine, that's not arbitrary. But I will share with you, and you'll share with me. I like other people's food. I want them to have my food. The Irish people invented pants, and for that, I'm thankful. That culture was shared with most of the rest of the world. I do have kilts as well, but I'm very thankful for pants. Mark 16:15. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Preach the gospel to all of creation. Now, the left believes that tradition holds us back. But the right understands that tradition is valuable, even if they don't know why a particular tradition is valuable. Most traditions became traditions because of many years of repetition of something that worked. 2 Thessalonians 2:15. Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which you have been taught, whether by word or by epistle. To quote a character that I like, there's no tradition like a new tradition. Just like cultural traditions, some traditions are good and some are not so good. For the good ones, hold tight. For the ones that are not so good, get rid of them. And there's always room for a new tradition if it helps you live a life of faith. Colossians 2:8. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Traditions of man that deceive us, we need to change those traditions. But the left wants to change traditions that lead to a better culture. They want to start over. The left is always about destroying what is present without discerning if it's good or evil. Matthew 15:3. But he answered and said unto them, Why do you also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? It's a bad tradition. He's talking to the scribes and Pharisees here, and they had developed traditions that violated the commandments of God. Do we do that today? I was raised a Baptist, and I still hold to traditional Baptist beliefs. A lot of modern Baptist beliefs I could do without, but I still hold to traditional Baptist beliefs, and I can tell you that Baptists are more than happy to point out the man-made traditions in the Catholic Church. But what about the man-made traditions in the Baptist Church? We kind of ignore those. Or how about Protestant churches in general? And I know that Baptist is not technically Protestant. I'm lumping them together here because it's close enough for that, but we ignore what's right in front of us. Do you celebrate Christmas or do you celebrate the birth of Jesus? Do you celebrate it on the birthday of the sun god, December 25th, or do you celebrate it on the actual day? Now, my opinion is that we can celebrate it on December 25th, since that is the day that we have off to spend with our families. But we should understand the importance of the actual timing of it, and we should understand what is simply tradition, and we should separate the two. And I could be wrong about this opinion, but that's my opinion, that it's okay to celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th, but you should know the real date and the timing behind it. Do you celebrate Easter? That's a pagan holiday. That's even named after a pagan goddess. How about Valentine's Day? We're not going to go there, but do you practice that one in your church? There are many traditions that violate the commandments of God, and it's not just the other guys who are doing it. And once again, I'm not picking on Catholics. I know plenty of good Christians in the Catholic Church, but I am talking about the power structure of the church itself. And we're going to talk more about that in the next couple of weeks, probably, because it's pretty bad. But I'm never talking about Catholic people. I'm never talking about the Christians within the church itself. But he asks, why do you transgress our commandment of God by your tradition? Do you even know what the commandment of God is? Do you know what is simply tradition? Those are questions that you need to ask yourself, and you need to think about that. Now, the left believes it is wrong to judge somebody by the results, but it's okay to judge them only by their efforts or their intentions. They have good intentions. Well, the right thinks that you should judge only by competency with some leeway for those who may not have the ability to perform. We allow for compassion. This is called meritocracy. If you go to a restaurant and you buy a meal, do you judge that meal based upon how hard an incompetent cook tried? Or do you judge it based upon its taste and composition? Now, you may find yourself in an exceptional situation in which you may have to show mercy. Say, somebody is trying to show you hospitality and they cook you a meal that may not be to your liking. Well, you eat it and you smile and you tell them how good it is, even if it's horrible. But if you hire somebody to cook, you expect them to cook well. If you hire somebody to sweep your driveway, you expect them to sweep your driveway well. And if you hire somebody to sell cars, you expect them to sell cars. Where do we find this idea in the Bible? 1 Corinthians 9:24. Know you not that they which run in a race run all, but one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain. In the ancient Olympics, everyone who competed was expected to properly prepare and train for the games. If they didn't, they were shamed. Sometimes they were jailed for fraud, and there were even instances in which they were executed for not doing their best. There were cases in which someone could not prepare properly due to extenuating circumstances. And in one event, in one case that I'm aware of, a competitor was shipwrecked and he arrived just barely in time to compete. Well, they gave him some leeway. He couldn't prepare. But sometimes they would be given a pass on proper preparation if there were extenuating circumstances. But otherwise, they were expected to compete and compete well. But even for everybody who competed, guess what? Not everybody won. Those who competed honorably, they were all honored for their effort. The people cheered them on, but they didn't get a participation trophy. Only one could win the prize. And that's what we're to do as Christians. Once again, to use racing, you know that I like racing. All who compete honorably are cheered and applauded, but if somebody gets caught cheating, they're disgraced. But the reward is not equal based upon effort. Person who comes in last place may try just as hard as a person that comes in first place, but the reward is based on outcome. First place gets a gold medal, second gets silver, third gets bronze, the next 7 places get points. That's running the race. But you have to run the race if you want the possibility of receiving the prize. That's what we're told to do throughout the Bible. Well, the left wants to destroy competition, and they want to make it so that you just honor and reward everybody equally, no matter the outcome. That has never worked throughout all of history, not a single time. Their way of viewing it is that excellence must be stopped. The last point I want us to look at is the left thinks that you should have loyalty to all of humanity and create a new world order. The right understands that you have loyalty to your group over others. John 17:9, I pray for them. I pray not for the world. This is Jesus talking about the apostles. Said, I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are mine. Even Jesus didn't pray for the world. We should try to reach the world, and we should try to preach the gospel, but we're to love the brethren. And in no place are we commanded to pray for the world or to love the world, much less are we to outlove the world, as so many churches proclaim as their mission. The brethren are those who are doing the will of the Father in heaven, and doing the will of the Father in heaven is being faithful to the one he sent, being faithful to Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. Psalm 122:6. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. While we're not to pray for the world, we are to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They're constantly under attack from her enemies. Most notably, right now, they're under attack by the so-called Palestinians. The Palestinians live in a Nephilim land. Gaza is a Nephilim land. Yet those who are on the left side of the political spectrum, they're fighting in favor of them and against the Jews. Even churches, local congregations, prominent churches that are otherwise somewhat sound, are against Jerusalem. They teach a replacement theology that the church has replaced Israel. That is a doctrine of demons straight out the pits of hell. The Old Testament in the Septuagint tells us that the Messiah would be sent to save both Jews and Gentiles. That was changed in the Hebrew Old Testament by Akiba, but that's how it was originally. He came for Jews and Gentiles. But after the Jews rejected the gospel of the kingdom, we are told that it is still to the Jew first. They're still God's chosen people. We have been grafted in if we're faithful, but they are still the chosen people. And today in this world, we're walking through a biblical political landscape. We're being dragged through it. We're not really walking through it. We're being pulled into it with beyond our will. Don't try to separate the Bible from politics. We need to be aware of what's going on. Why are these things happening? We know that it's going to get worse. And this tonight's study has been a brief description of the two basic paradigms in the political sphere today. And it is time to stop shying away from calling it what it is. Be polite and be civil, but be aware and be faithful. Show grace in your dealings, but don't be silent and blind. If we're to reach others, we must have eyes to see and ears to hear what's going on. And we know that time is short, and in the Western world, we have become both soft physically and soft spiritually. We're weak. But this is a war, and we're all part of it, whether we want to be or not. It's not your choice to be at war. You're still at war. Think about it.